Tara-Nicholle Kirk here. Let me just make sure that we are live on Facebook and all of the things. All right, Tara-Nicholle Kirk here. I am your self-mastery guide, a metaphysician, the founder and CEO of Soul Tour, where I help you be your big self and do your big dreams before you die. And I do that using what I call spiritual strategies. So it's integrated spiritual and practical strategies like the Jungian archetype system and like human design, which I teach in my School of Self-Mastery. We will be reopening enrollment in the School of Self-Mastery for the first time in like 18 months soon. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a behind the scenes dose today. Today we're here because it's Transformation Tuesday, and I want you to start thinking, some of you follow this, you know that I'm in the process of moving to Portugal with my 4-year-old. It's been a couple years process of scouting different locations around the globe, and I'm sharing some with you of how I do that decision-making process using the exact spiritual strategy tools I teach, like sacred money archetypes, like human design, like many, many other things. But one thing that I've been saying about this particular project, the way we do it spiritual strategy style versus the way the world does it, is there's in the world, the worldly way is the checklist way. People are like, oh, you're moving to a new country, where's your checklist? And I'm like, nah, fam, this is all about the vibe check. So I want you to start thinking checklist versus vibe check. Checklist versus vibe check. And I want you the headline of today's lesson will be to never, ever, 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 ever use your thinking, cognitive, logical, linear mind for these 3 things. So I'm actually going to give you 3 things I want you to use your thinking mind for, and 3 times I want you to turn it off. And hello, y'all. It's good to see you on all of the channels too. I am excited for today's talk. And actually today, I'm not, even though I prefaced it with the context about the Portugal move, I'm going to share a bunch more about that later this week. I'm going to share a bunch about this big event I've got cooking up later this week. Today, I want to just talk to you about the weekend I had. All right. So it was a long weekend. Long weekend plus single mom is a lot. All right. So Sunday morning, I took London to her skateboarding lesson and I took her to the club. I sat in the hot and I chucked her into kids club, which is why country clubs equal self-care. Chucked her in the kids club. I sat myself in the hot tub and I kind of was doing a very intentional, what I think of as like an auric reset, like an energy, like a vibe reset. All right. So I was sitting in the hot tub, intentionally resetting my aura, like feeling, and I do that a lot actually, when I feel any kind of inner constriction or resistance to a thing, or I just feel like grouchy. It's like a self-regulation check. Right? The way you make sure that shit does not roll downhill to your children is you take a break if you can. And it's a privileged position to be in that you can. You take a break, take a nap, take a walk, take a vacation, and do something that sort of resets the vibe, right? It's break the stress cycle. So I had been feeling a little stressed. So I got in the hot tub and I just felt like I was washing away the accumulated kind of stress energy that had piled up over the long weekend. And I was intentionally trying to do that in a way that was fine-tuning for what I knew was ahead, because I knew that I had this very delicious, yet very challenging journey, kind of marathon of a journey ahead. All right. So what had happened was that Friday, right before we signed off for the holiday weekend in the United States, I had received word from a truly beautiful, transcendently, magically delicious, iconic venue that they would indeed be able to host my first major live event this October. All right. And so I got that email. It had been like a month of talking with them and back and forth and, starting to drop hints to you guys. And I got that email and I truly felt like, I don't know, those old Serena clips where she's just she got a crown on a tennis racket and she's putting it on her head. That was me on Friday. You could not tell me nothing. okay? At first, because as is wont to happen with big dreams that do fulfill your sacred contracts, as I started, some of you guys know this, some of you don't. I actually used to be a lawyer. So as I turn on my old lawyer brain to start to review the details of the proposal from the venue, I could kind of feel, I could see it. I've been through this a lot of times now, so I could see it happening. I could feel my thinking brain begin to do the thing that thinking brains do, which is they take over. They take over. Your thinking brain can take you from like, oh my gosh, I had this inspired download. I put it out there. People are willing to rendezvous with me in my zone of genius for the benefit of all. This is amazing. Queen style. It's great to be queen. Then your thinking brain turns on and it's like, troubleshoot, think it through, forecast all the problems that could happen. Like, what are all the unanswered questions? Who's going to handle all of that? How will all of this play out? Like, I could feel it happening, like in real time. I could even feel the ghost of my old inner critic, which has been retired for a while, to be honest. I could feel it trying to like creep up. And it reminded me of like London's always listening to Snow White, and they talk about how the witch was at the door. The dwarves left for the day, and the witch was at the door with like a poison apple, being like, "Don't you want this beautiful apple?" I felt like my inner critic was at the door with a poison, with a poison apple. And the poison apple was sort of the thought, that's, that's only 4 months. You're already behind. See, the lie of time scarcity is actually a very signature lie of the inner critic, a very signature lie of the voice of fear. So I was like, oh, I see you, inner critic. So, good news is I'm very fortunate that I've been in the spiritual strategy game for a very long time. In fact, I actually like created and codified this particular version of this particular game in collaboration with Source, all that is spirit, God, of course. So and I see my life is an experiment. This is what I do. What I do for a living is PR for God, and then the God within you, and then experiment with life so that I can, sort through which spiritual strategies work and bring them back to my folks. So while my thinking mind said, get up, get going, take London to Kids Club and start working on the marketing plan, start the staffing plan, the one mind, the divine mind, that's not even in my mind, it is the divine mind that I am, said, take London to Kids Club, get in the hot tub, work on your state, work on your, if you got to work on something, work on your receptivity, work on your joy, work on your celebrating where you're already at, work on your dreaming. Just get in the hot tub and dream. And so, sometimes your thinking mind can become the voice of your hindering inner critic, or the voice of your conditioned trances, the voice of your not self, we would call it in human design, or your small self, I would call it in Tara speak, right? But the divine mind is always the voice of the wise inner being within you. It's the voice of God that speaks to you within you. So when, the divine mind says, get in the hot tub and dream, that's what I did. That's what I did, because I know which voice to obey these days. I know that when there's a tug of war between small self and big self, I always drop the rope. My aspiration is to always drop the rope and let my big self win. And it's easier and easier and easier to do when you know what I know. So things that I know that when I feel that inner pain, that's like, big dream, moving forward, struggle switch, I know that when that happens, what's happening is actually something to celebrate. I say, literally to myself, I'll say, I just hit a new upper limit. And then I congratulate myself for doing life right. Because you only hit new upper limits when you leave the old la la land of your fear trances. When you leave the old sort of zone of self-narcotizing, of staying in your old comfort zones. All right. So I know to always, when I hit a new upper limit, celebrate, celebrate that I'm doing it right. And I know that the power, you know what I know? I know the power of a big, delicious, delectable dream that feels like you're licking the plate of your life. I know what happens when you fall in love with your own dreams. When you fall in love with your own self, when you fall in love with your own future, you become literally unstoppable. Your unlived life starts to come online. Parts of you that you forgot sometimes start to come online. You get access to new powers or new corners of your powers that you've never accessed before. And I know the power of that emotion, that like, I am lit. This is a dream big enough, delicious enough to me, right feeling enough to me that it feels like licking the plate of life. The power of that emotion will carry you. It will carry you through the self sabotage work, through the shadow work, over every mountain, through every valley. You will inevitably pass through on the way to being the being you came here to be, and on the way to diving into the very deep waters that you got to dive into to fulfill your sacred contracts. Peace and Possibility on Instagram is saying, yes, so timely. She had a salt bath yesterday. That's like the rule book for projectors in particular in human design should be like, take a salt bath every day. But it hurts no type. Every type in human design can benefit from immersion in water. Salt helps. So that's, one other thing I do want to say. Well, let me speak as metaphysician. So one thing I know is that it is universal law. I'm going to say it in a colloquial way, but it is universal law that there are no happy endings to miserable journeys. So should you desire a happy ending, you better get your journey right. You better practice happiness on the journey. Because if you haven't practiced it on the journey, it ain't going to magically appear when you get to the destination. All right. Okay. So that's metaphysician work. As in human design, I'm a projector and I know my aura. I know my energy body. I know that it is so encompassing. And I tell this story to my students all the time. And the first time I got this phrase, I actually got in an Uber and had this like wild spiritual like meeting of the spirits and souls with this driver. It was this elderly man who had been doing work, his whole life's work was actually really relevant to my work. So we had this beautiful conversation. And then he said, I'm getting a contact high off of your energy. All right, that's classic projector. If anyone has ever said anything to you like that, as a projector, you should know that your aura, your energy body is so focused and so encompassing to other, especially to one-on-one conversations, that I have had many times my students say, just being in the room, I'm getting like this contact high of your energy being in the room with you. So what that means for me as a teacher and as an entrepreneur is that I take great, great, great responsibility for tending to the energy I bring into the room, because I know it's super contagious. So I make sure I get my energy shit right way at the beginning of the project so that anyone who comes into contact with it that should get a contact high off the energy I was in when I created it is in for a wonderful co-creation moment. All right. So that's how I knew the very first steps for the perfect unfolding of this transcendently, magically, transformationally delicious event that I'm about to tell y'all about would have nothing to do with budgets or spreadsheets or even staffing, or even though all of those things are coming together really, really rapid fire, because that's what happens when you are in alignment and you call forth more alignment, is things just start to line up and light up without you working hard, right? In order to get to the aligned step, though, there are prerequisites. I was going to get legal. There are like Antecedents. There are prerequisites. There are conditions precedent that you have to check the boxes of, that you have to go through before you can get to alignment stage. So many people want to get to that alignment stage where you're taking inspired action, and it's all coming together, and everything's just like, everything is always working out for you, and the universe is just throwing everything you need right in. Listen, that stuff happens. It is real. It is available to you. And before you can have that kind of an alignment experience, you need to have a self actualization experience. And before you can actualize, you must have self discovery. Before you can do that, you must recalibrate. So, in my self mastery method, there are 3 steps. They go like this: recalibrate, actualize, align. You will hear me say those 3 words in that order a million times because the order never changes. Ain't nobody creating new wisdom, y'all. Okay? It's not a thing. All right. So, the first step to creating anything you ever want to create, if you're wanting to do it the spiritual strategy way, meaning if you're wanting to do it in a way that you to reach more of your potential, gets you to fulfill more of your sacred contracts, the first step is always to recalibrate. So this weekend, that's what I did. I took the first big step into the next season of my big self and my big dream, and that was recalibrating. I got into receptive mode. I rested. There was a day this weekend where I was like, but I need to work. Nope. When you start to feel like that, I never want to create when I'm in that, there's all this has to get done mode. I don't want to transmit scarcity and angst to my people. So I don't create when I'm in that mode. I rested. I invited spirit, show me the way. I took the baby to the park, to the pool. We went everywhere else. I saw where there were old patterns within me that wanted to rear their heads. I'll do it myself syndrome, like, let's just get it done. Let's hustle. No, we're not doing that. So I noted those patterns. I named those patterns. I surfed the wave of the ugh of those patterns, and I let them pass on by because that's what waves do. I stopped trying to think anything through. I stopped trying to figure anything out. I stopped trying to solve any problem. I did an energy upgrade to get in the exact expansive, limitless state of being I want to transmit to every single brilliant soul in the room at Upgrade, which is the name of my event. And that includes you, because I intend for you to be in the room at my event. And then I ran a few miles and I threw some heavy weight around the gym. And then I got in the steam room, and then I got into the swirling bubbles of the hot tub, and I just worked my yayas out. Sometimes you feel like a terrier. This is actually one way I describe generators. My daughter's a generator. And my daughter and probably 50% of my students, maybe even more, are generators. And I say, hey, if you're a generator, you're like a terrier, man. You got to have a lot of physical activity in every single day so that you're worn down at the end of the day so that you can actually rest. Well, sometimes when I'm worked all up, I can be in that terrier mode too. So I ran and ran and ran and ran and ran, and I threw the heavy weight, and I stretched, and I rolled, and I got in the hot tub. And as I closed my eyes in the hot tub, and I literally said to myself, stop trying to think it through. There's no problem to solve here. You don't have to figure it out. Just dream. And as I closed my eyes in the hot tub, I started to dream the dream. I saw the vivid, delicious vision for this event. I could literally see you. I could see you dressed to the nines, heart open with the resonance of the teachings I am transmitting at this event. Open to the guidance as I help you download your own vivid vision for your life with my guidance. And just smiling with the blissful joy of rediscovering your own magic. Because this next season of my work is not actually about me convincing you that I'm magical at all. This is about me reminding you and revealing to you how magical you are. All right. So I could literally see it. I could see you. I could hear the music. I could taste the food. I could smell the fragrance. I could see the art. I could see the dream. in vivid color. And I could see it as a build or progression on the dream I originally had when I downloaded the early vision, the initial idea for this event. It's called Upgrade Your Money and Your Life. Um, and I downloaded the vision initially like 3-4 months ago, right? So, and I had a really clear vision then, and it just sort of has evolved. All right. So, what I want you to know is that we give so much credit in this culture. We give so much credit in this culture to all the things in the immature masculine archetypes, right? To productivity, performance, and over intellectualizing things. Um, thinking versus being, thinking versus feeling, right? And the truth is that your energetic intelligence, your spiritual intelligence, your knowing, your intuition, your divine mind is like 100,000 times more intelligent than your very intelligent thinking cognitive mind is. It has, for two reasons. One, your spiritual intelligence has access to a whole lot of energy and information that your cognitive thinking mind does not yet have access to, because your cognitive thinking mind only has access to information that it can be translated through your physical senses. All right. Your spiritual intelligence, the infinite intelligence of the divine that is in every cell of your body, has sensory receptors that translate energies we don't even know exist yet with our cognitive minds. Okay. So that's one reason. The second reason is that your thinking brain is highly, highly, highly susceptible to fear and conditioning. Your thinking mind is your conditioned mind. So it will often lead you down a thought path that seems logical, but is actually a path of fear-based, conditioning-based momentum that, you probably don't want to recreate. All right. So if you're really down for new beginnings, you may not want to try to plot your new beginnings with your old thinking mind. All right. So on top of all that, most people, I mean, I'm trying to think how much I want to talk about culture right now, because our culture does is in a trance of perform, conform, produce, and our culture is entranced by the lie that rapid output is somehow superior to divine timing, which is literally the opposite of the truth. All right. And so that's kind of why, that's like the backstory behind why most people who have a big vision or big dream or big goal have this little bit of a honeymoon session with it, and then immediately begin overthinking. They overthink, they take the joy out of it, they suck the life out of it, and they just never actually do it because they lose the inner tug of war between their wise inner being and their hindering inner critic, right? And the hindering inner critic is the one who hijacks your brain and can plead a very convincing case in favor of your limitations, can really convince you that you're bananas if you think you can pull that off. Who do you think you are? I keep telling my students that the genius, the divine genius within you, the true sacred self you, the big self you, is a once in an ever, not once in a lifetime, a once in an ever configuration of energies, spirit, soul, gifts, talents, traits. Your wise inner being is the only one like it ever. Your hindering inner critic is like wildly unoriginal. It's telling the same nonsense, lies, and trances that everybody else's inner critic is. That's why I love to teach inner critic work in big groups, because it's wild to see people be like, oh my gosh, their inner critic is saying the exact same thing as mine is. I'm like, yeah, that's because that's how it works. So here's a guideline for you. Your thinking mind, which in human design we would call your head center, is your crown center, your ajna. And that's also, those correspond directly to the chakras, head and the crown and ajna or third eye chakras in Hinduism. Your thinking mind are good for these things and these things only. They're great for downloads. So from your head, get your downloads. Download brilliant, inspired golden threads of ideas from higher realms. And you know what? You know them when you feel them. You just do. All right. Dreaming. So literally slowing your thoughts down a little bit for a minute every day and letting yourself daydream about hypothetical situations that feel good to you just because they feel good to you, without trying to make any of it happen and without trying to think about what you got to do next. When you do this, you actually, there's a really intricate and beautiful explanation of how this works in human design system that I will give you. It's how you can fix your broken law of attraction. I'll give that as a talk sometime soon. But what happens when you start to daydream beautiful feeling daydreams with your head centers, you actually begin to tune your G center, your heart, which is heart-ish, to the emotional channel that allows you to see and energize the opportunities and the resources and the collaborators that are all around you that want to co-create your dream with you. Okay, so know that there are opportunities and resources all around you all the time to create what you want to create. When you start to use your mind, instead of trying to think everything through and troubleshoot and all of that, figure out the how, don't do that. Instead, if you use it to daydream, you start to call forth the emotion that in your G center will begin to magnetize in and allow you to see all the opportunities and co-creators around you. Okay. And then documenting. That's the third. Your thinking mind, your head centers and human design are very good at tracking and measuring. Now, if you know me, you know I'm not a huge fan of tracking and measuring, because tracking and measuring, when people do it with respect to their own dreams and goals, often turns into the cultural warped shadow, which is like rushing and judging. Judging where you are right now is wrong. So I'm telling you that, your thinking mind is good at documenting because it is a valid use of your thinking mind. Okay, very occasionally. Just know that your thinking mind wants to do these things: track, judge, rush your process and your progress way more than it's really helpful to do. And because your thinking mind is very susceptible to fear and to conditioning, it will almost always seek out and find create narratives that again, will track and measure and rush and judge your progress or where you are right now as deficient. And again, that's just not helpful. So that's one reason why the most prolific, most inspired creators of our time and of all time are those who suspend the budgeting and the tracking and the spreadsheeting until a stage of the process where the creation has already taken root, right? So they don't suffocate and spreadsheet the life out of this inspired idea, because inspiration is about inspired, spirit in, all right? And spirit doesn't fit into spreadsheet boxes, not at the beginning. All right. Now, your thinking mind, those are the three things that your thinking mind is great at: downloading, dreaming, and documenting. Now I want to give you three things I want you to not use your thinking mind to do. Your thinking mind is very bad at doing these three things, and know that this is going to run contrary to everything you've ever learned. All right. So one, your thinking mind is terrible at desiring. Terrible at desiring. Okay. Your brain and your inner critic will have you setting goals that seem logical and linear and smart, and that you rarely achieve because you actually don't give a shit about them, or you do achieve, but they're rarely satisfying when they are achieved. All right. Because your thinking mind, again, is conditioned. So it's often setting your goals. If you let your thinking mind set your desires, it'll set them way small because that's what it feels is safe for you to pursue. Or it'll set goals that are, tell you desire stuff that you don't even really desire. You just don't care that much about them. But it seems like the smart thing to do. So it's a very externally validating system, your thinking mind. Now, the desires of your heart are another thing entirely. But like divine order, the desires of your heart are rarely logical or linear. And I said this last week, and I'm going to keep saying it because somebody needs to hear it. Some of you are not achieving the goals that you keep setting because they're way smaller than your true sacred self is destined to be. So you're never getting traction on the small. And because your thinking conditioned mind says you have to hit the small goals before you can get to the big ones, you're never getting to the ones that feel really right to you. Right. So some of us, when we stopped even messing around with that small stuff and started to play the big game, everything starts to take off and click into alignment. That's how alignment with divine order works. All right. Okay. Your thinking mind is also terrible at deciding what you should do with your life. Okay, so once you desire a pure desire from the place of your true sacred self, not your harsh inner critic, not your fear, you got to add the spark of decision or commitment to take it from dream or desire to an intention that can actually work. All right. And your mind, your thinking mind, always wants to argue for your limitations, not your expansion, because it wants you to stay safe. And that's how it knows to keep you safe. So never let your thinking mind alone run your decisions. Okay. That should be the role. There is a huge role for your intuition, your wise inner being, your inner guidance to play. And your intuition, your wise inner being, your inner guidance speaks or sounds differently for different people according to your unique design. All right, so we can talk much more about how that works later in human design. It's one of the things that I love about human design. It actually tells you how you will make decisions and what your inner guidance, how your inner guidance speaks to you. And what I find is that most people, when they first hear it, it's like kooky, but you're like, but also, yeah, I have that. I have that. Right? You've just been overruling it and overriding it your whole life because your thinking mind has been conditioned to do that. Third thing I want you to not let your thinking conditioned mind do is to determine the how things should play out, how you should go about pursuing the vision, the dream, the inspired idea. Okay, so your thinking brain wants to determine all of the hows. It literally wants to sit down and write out an action plan and get a spreadsheet, figure it out, and make it happen. Okay, but 9 times out of 10, even if you get from here to here, life is going to throw you a bunch of plot twists. Okay. Like the chances that you write this detailed action plan from here to here and you actually follow the action plan and life throws you no curveballs along the way are like 0. So, hey, write an action plan if you need to, if it just really floats your boat, but keep your attachments to it very light. Keep your attachments to it very light. And if you don't need to create a very detailed, very far out action plan, why don't you try this? Try letting the divine handle the how. Try taking just the natural next step that lines up and lights up before you. And usually, if the project is big or a big businessy thing, along the way, somewhere along the way, the plan, the spreadsheet, the staffing plan, all of that starts to feel like the natural next step. So don't get out in front of you, ahead of yourself. Don't do it before it feels really good to do it. I like to think like, I don't like to do budgets when they feel like they will constrain my decisions. I do a budget once it feels more like a beautiful receptacle that brings divine order to the project. All right. So I'm getting ready to sign off now. I just wanted to share this little thing. I have this thing I say to London as I put her to bed at night. I say, you have a world-class brain, baby. You have a world-class brain, I tell her. All right, because my intention is do you know that they say we have like hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of hours of tapes of thoughts that play like tapes in our heads? And many of those thoughts were instilled by things that our parents said to us repetitively when we were young. So I say a lot of things to her intentionally and repetitively because I want them to be her unconscious narratives, or at least to be part of them. And one of them is this. I say, you've got a world-class brain, my love. She says, she's falling asleep. I've got a world-class brain. And you have a world-class brain too. All right. But It is meant to be your servant and not your master, ever. All right? So don't let it run you. Okay, keep your head up, keep your heart out. Look for much more from me over the next couple of weeks. I'm happy to tell you much more about when I use a checklist and when I use a vibe check as I'm planning the move to Portugal. If you want to hear more about that, let me know. Just type the move in the comments. Also, look for a save the dates soon for Upgrade Your Money and Your Life, which will be our first major live event here in Berkeley, Oakland, in the United States of Oakland, as I like to call it, in California, and that'll be later this fall. So look for a save the date from me this week. All right, I love you guys. I will see you next Transformation Tuesday.